If you have diabetes, you've likely been given the worst advice when it comes to your diet. You've probably been told to go low fat, and you've probably also been told at some point to cut down on your calories. Maybe you've even been told to eat small, frequent meals and to avoid certain specific foods. But no one has told you the most important thing about your diet. And that is exactly why you might continue to fail. So here's the truth. Our body has fundamental nutritional needs. So it's really not just about cutting things out. It's actually about what you need to put into your system to thrive. So if you don't meet your basic fundamental body's needs, there's a risk. Your cravings probably will get a lot worse. Your blood sugar, as a result, will probably become more unstable. And you're always going to feel like you're fighting this uphill battle. And obviously, if you're somebody with diabetes, that's a terrible situation to be in. So today in this video, we're going to break down what is the number one biggest mistake that I am noticing diabetics are making by following mainstream bad advice. And then we're gonna go over how you can actually think about this instead to come up with a regimen that works really well for you. By the end of this video, you are going to really lock in what is a very balanced approach to your diet if you have diabetes. And I will argue that this is an approach you probably will not find anywhere else on the internet. And I've never heard anybody else say it this way. That's why I'm saying this to you today. So I'm really not here to sell you a supplement with this information. I'm a doctor. I am just trying to help you tackle your diabetes and make it sustainable. I'm hoping that you will feel informed and empowered so that you can go on and make much better dietary decisions to beat your diabetes. So if this is your first video with me, hey, I'm Dr. Anna. I am a medical doctor. I'm also a nutrition professional. And what I do is I help diabetics take control of their health without extreme dietary approaches and approaches that really just don't get to the bottom root issues that are running rampant in diabetes. And so I work with patients on these issues every single day in my clinical practice, and I've really seen what people are struggling with. Okay, let's dive right into this video. Let's jump into the topic. So I wanna break this down by highlighting the specific trendy diets that I think a lot of people are suckered into when they have diabetes because the arguments are so appealing, but we're gonna break them down one by one so we really understand why each of these approaches is problematic for diabetes. So let's first talk, what are the two diets? We're gonna address separately both low carb and low fat diets. Let's talk about why each of these approaches might be failing you. So I have to warn you a little bit before we get into this. This conversation is loaded with nuance, differing opinions. You will hear so many videos from so many other health professionals all over the internet, sometimes with completely opposite viewpoints. And there's a huge risk that you're gonna get confused. And I will be really frank with you. It took me a long time in my nutritional training and in my medical training to really lock in for myself what my personal views are, because there can be so many opposing opinions on this topic. So I'm just gonna be upfront with you. I think that this can be a really confusing topic, and I wanna make it as easy and simple for you to understand and apply to your life. So I made you a free PDF guide. This information really is a summary of all my knowledge, my wisdom, my clinical experience to help patients and people like you simplify healthy eating. So I like to call this the perfect meal formula. It's a PDF. You can download it with the link is in the description below this video. Get your copy so that you can manage approaching all your meals so much easier and we can cut through all the noise together. Okay, let's keep going with the issues here. Bird's eye view for a second. Most diabetics are usually given one of two pieces of advice. Either you want to go low carb and really control all your carbohydrates and count up all the grams of carbs in your day or in each individual meal. Or on the other end, kind of at the other extreme, people are saying go low fat, control your carbs to make most of your diet the healthy carbohydrates. And the thing is, most of these approaches certainly can work in the short term, and they actually both can lead to weight loss, which is a really common thing a lot of diabetics are looking to do. So it's really crucial that you understand that it's not that either of these are wrong, they're just extreme, and for some people, they do work. But I'd argue they both miss a very critical piece of the puzzle of healthy metabolism, a healthy diet, and healthy approaches to diabetes. The problem is, if you miss this critical piece of the puzzle, you risk being stuck in a cycle of cravings, fatigue, and frustration, okay? So we're gonna break these each down one by one so we can understand why each of these approaches can be problematic. We're gonna start with, I think, what is now the more trendy and popular dietary approach for diabetes that I'm seeing online and I'm seeing my patients ask me about. And I will tell you, this is something that people are really passionate about these days. So we're gonna start by addressing a low carbohydrate diet or a controlled carbohydrate diet, usually one that results in a high amount of fat. So I'm gonna tell you a story. This was a few months ago. I was at the gym, and this was a day where I went to the gym earlier than I usually do. It was like 6:30 in the morning, and I was minding my own business. I was working on my machines. I was doing my reps, and a man approached me. He probably was around 70 years old. Very nice. He came over, and I'd never met him before. I've never seen him before. And he just started talking to me, and I was pretty sure he didn't know who I was, didn't know that I'm a physician. And he just started saying, I have to tell you, the craziest thing has been happening to me. It's a revolution. You need to know about this. Like, people just need to eat only meat. Carnivore diet is it. Like, this is the solution everyone's been looking for, and like, it's changing my life. You got to start eating this way. And he's going on and on and on and telling me with so much passion and enthusiasm about the carnivore diet. Now, I make these YouTube videos, so I obviously see nutritional information on YouTube and online, and I know that this is a really trendy dietary approach these days. So I just kind of let him talk, and he said his whole spiel, and I didn't really say much. I didn't tell him anything about myself. He just really needed me to know how passionate he was about this. So let's understand that this has almost like a cult-like following these days. People who are really into these higher fat, higher meat, higher like ketogenic approaches. People are really, really into it, and some of you might find yourselves in that boat. So this is going to be my personal opinion, my professional opinion as well. I see some problems with a very low carbohydrate diet, and I want to lay it out to you here. So the first point is that low carb diets, absolutely, we need to be clear about this. They can be effective for diabetes, and they are definitely effective for managing blood sugar if they are done correctly. So we have a few different flavors of these dietary approaches. One is the popular ketogenic or keto diet. By formal definition, this is a diet that if you're looking at all the calories you eat overall in a day or overall in your diet, how you would break it down by the macronutrients. So the percentage of calories coming from each macronutrient would be roughly 85% of your diet is a fat molecule, is a calorie that comes from a fat source. And then it's roughly around 15%, anywhere from 10 to 20% protein, and a very low amount of carbohydrate, roughly 5% carbohydrate. So that is in and of itself extreme. Now, we're not gonna go into the details of where this diet comes from, but it's actually been around for decades, and it originally came from a doctor recognizing in his patients, who are usually children who had seizure disorders or epilepsy, did really well on eating a lot of fat. So there is definitely a certain circumstance where this diet is appropriate, clinically speaking. Now, on the other side of this, a little bit more popular these days is this carnivore diet. By definition, it has more protein than a ketogenic diet because you're eating almost all animal foods, if not all animal foods. So it's meats, it's eggs, it's butter, it's dairy. These are foods that contain a lot of protein. So it's mostly fat, and then still, I would say, a more moderate amount of protein, and still very low, if not zero, carbohydrate for the most part. However, there's some nuance to that because even in butter, there's a little bit of carb. So here's where I think a lot of people go wrong on this dietary approach. They cut out these carbs, but then they're not controlling the rest of the diet, and they're not replacing those carbs with healthy foods, with healthy sources of fats and proteins. So you run a risk of being A, deficient in nutrients, but B, not eating healthy at all. So what you need to understand is that there's a lot of variation. So I want you to think about this in two different points. Again, this is my personal take on this. I'm not speaking for anyone else other than myself here. But the reason ketogenic diet is so popular is because When it comes to the way our body processes energy, there's two mechanisms, okay? We're not gonna go into the nitty-gritty details of biochemistry because I would put all of you to sleep, even though it's one of my favorite topics. But you need to understand there's basically two different mechanisms that control the way our body processes energy. A primary way is by using glucose, which is a basic molecule of sugar that carbohydrates break down into, and our body has a way of converting other types of fuel like fat into carbohydrates. And then an alternative is something called ketosis. That is a process that kicks in when our body is in starvation mode. Technically speaking, starvation mode means you ran out of a source of glucose, okay? It's a body's mechanism for surviving. Because think about it, back when we were animals in the wild, you were trying to catch and kill your prey, and then you were trying to collect berries, for example, in the bush. But depending on the season of the year, you could not control how much food you had access to. So our body had a way to continue to live, keep our organs alive, keep our body alive, without having a source of incoming fuel. So that's what ketosis is. The thing you need to understand is to properly do the ketogenic diet where you're gonna get the clinical benefit. You really want your body to be kicked in to that state of ketosis. Now, this is a deep discussion and we will not go into it here in this video anymore, but absolutely theoretically, this makes sense. The problem is most people, they think they're doing keto and they're not. Okay, now let's talk for a second about the carnivore diet. The carnivore diet, I would argue, has a little bit less benefit than even this ketogenic diet because you're not changing the mechanism inside your body, because you're not actually at that point where you have so much fat that you're able to kick on ketosis. There's a risk that you're eating so much protein and fat that your body is still trying to utilize sugar for energy, because there is carbohydrate in certain kinds of animal products. Completely true. Lactose is a sugar molecule. It's found in milk, it's found in any dairy, it's found in cheese, it's found in butter. So for example, okay? So the risk is with both ketogenic, carnivore, or any other flavor of these kinds of zero carbohydrate or very low carbohydrate diets is that they are extreme by definition. Now, some of you out there have personalities that really are geared towards approaches that are extreme, and you do well with that. You're probably the kind of person that if you were a cigarette smoker, you could just quit cold turkey one day and be done with it. That doesn't really work for everyone though. So extreme approaches are not widely applied to the population in a way that's going to work. Like, that's my personal view on it. The other side of this is that a lot of high fat, high protein foods can be really expensive. Carbohydrate foods tend to be some of the cheaper ones. Think of rice and beans and veggies compared to a piece of steak or yogurts and eggs. So those foods inherently cost more money. So there's a risk of that dietary approach just costing more overall. And then ultimately, because it's so extreme, it's risking being unsustainable for the long term. And the whole point of approaching your diet is not to do something in the short term. It's to do things in the long term that keep you healthy overall. Remember, diabetes is a chronic disease. If we do something to fix diabetes or address our diabetes that lasts 1 month, well, I'm very sorry to tell you, you might have done something great for yourself in 1 month, but what's gonna happen 1 year from now? After it's been 11 months since you were doing that thing, it's almost like it made no difference. You're back to square one. So the goal is to try to use tools and tactics that are gonna work in the long term. So that's where I see a bit of an issue with some of these extreme diets. And here's another point. I talk to so many of my friends who are dietitians and my colleagues in the hospital who work with patients and talk about diet all the time. And the number one thing they always tell me is that they have so many clients and so many patients that are coming to them telling them, hey, I'm doing keto, or I'm eating keto, or I've been doing keto for 4 weeks, I've been doing keto for 2 months. And then when they sit down and they kind of break down nutritionally exactly what they're eating. Tell me about your lunches, tell me about your dinners, tell me about your grocery cart. And they kind of walk through it. Turns out they're not actually eating keto at all. They're eating plenty of carbohydrates still without maybe realizing it. So it's not the same doing a keto approach as just eating a higher fat diet. Those are two different things. So ultimately, you may not even be doing this effectively if you don't have the right guidance. The problem is if you're eating a diet that is not really kicking your body into ketosis and it's just adding a lot more fat, but you're not controlling the rest of the calories and keeping those carbs low enough to make sure you're in keto, well, the risk is, fats are the most calorie dense molecules. They're the most calorie dense macronutrient. You risk just eating too many calories. And guess what? If you were trying to do this dietary approach for weight loss, you might inadvertently be sabotaging the very goal that motivated you to do this in the first place. And that would be such a shame, right? So there's one other piece that I have to mention because I'm a physician. I studied science for at least the last 10 years, and this is the way I am trained to think. We, unfortunately, do not have a lot of long-term data to support these dietary approaches. Now, I'm sure all of you out there can think of at least 10 different YouTubers that you've said, but they talk about all this data. There is research. I'm not saying that there isn't research. There just isn't long-term research of data that's been collected and studied for at least 10 years, at least 20 years, because these diets are more popular in the recent times. And the challenge is a lot of the research that's still out there, while it might be legit, it's at the caliber where we're looking more at case reports, an individual person's experience, or a small cohort of patients. Maybe there's a study that only has 10, 20, or 30 patients in it. That is not the same as a study that is an analysis of the data that's hundreds of thousands of patients. So I'm personally not comfortable as a medical professional directly recommending that somebody follow something like a ketogenic or a carnivore diet. That doesn't mean I think it's evil and bad and you can't do it if you want to. I'm just recommending that you get guidance from a healthcare professional if you're opting to do this. And this is what I talk to my patients about. I'm very transparent with them that I know that people get a lot of benefit from this. I understand the mechanisms perfectly for how ketosis is really great for driving down your insulin, which is an inherent mechanism that's problematic in diabetes. Again, topic for another video. But I personally am not comfortable recommending it because I don't see enough long-term studies with large swaths of patients that are with statistics showing these results that are very strongly linked to the mechanism that's underlying it or causing it. So that's just my personal approach. So if I lost you, I apologize. Let's get back to the story here. What happens, okay, if you are trying to do a dietary approach that is extremely high in fat and low in carb, but you're not really doing it effectively? You run the risk of feeling exhausted, hungrier, and then constantly craving something to eat, which, as we probably all have experienced at some point, it led us to a binge eating behavior. This is so highly risky, especially for someone with diabetes. You really can't even measure how risky this can be, because if you allow yourself to binge once, because it's the only way you can quench your craving, you're setting yourself up for a pattern of doing this. And we know that this is just not healthy for us on every level, in the physiological level, in our mental health level. So we really need to be careful of this. Now, if you also just remove all the carbs without fixing the rest of your diet and setting yourself up for success properly, you really are asking for failure. That's the way I usually see this. So I want to switch gears now. Let's take a breath. We're done with talking about these really high fat, low carb diets. Let's flip the coin for a second. And now I want to address the other trendy diet that you hear a lot on the internet. And that's actually been proposed by many physicians for a lot longer, but I find it still extreme. And this is the low fat diet. So low fat. Many of you, especially if you're at least 50 years old, can remember a time that you've been told by the doctor that fat is bad. Fat is bad for your heart, it's bad for your cholesterol, it's bad for your metabolism, it's gonna lead to weight gain and obesity and brain disease and you name it. We've been told this in the past, okay? This is all based off of what I would say pretty bad science, and it's kind of gotten debunked at this point, but people are still really on this train. It's because some people are still finding themselves losing weight in this way. And it can be effective for really driving down the number of calories you eat because, again, fat is the most calorie dense type of macronutrient we have. That means for every individual gram of a fat compared to a protein or a carb, the fat has more than twice the number of calories. It's 9 calories per gram. Fat and carbs are 4 calories per gram, okay? We don't need to break down that any further, but you just need to understand they're not all equal across the board. So if you control your fats, you are controlling your calories. Now, Here's the challenge, okay? When you cut out fat, you lose what I would argue is the most powerful tool for keeping your blood sugar stable and controlling your hunger. One of the most powerful tools, if not the most, okay? Fats, especially healthy fats, are essential for our body. They help us slow down digestion. They help you stay full. They help you prevent blood sugar spikes. And they help you enjoy your meal. Most of the flavor comes from fat, and so enjoyment is a crucial component for a sustainable, healthy diet. Problem is, when you remove these oils and fats from your diet, you end up hungrier, you end up more likely to overeat and even binge, and you're probably still struggling with insulin resistance. Now, if you have diabetes, you've probably heard before that insulin resistance is the underlying mechanism driving type 2 diabetes, and that's absolutely true. So if you remove fat, this probably means that you end up eating much more carbohydrate, because if we're assuming that everybody's getting the total requirement of calories in their day to meet their body's needs, if you take away the fat, you have to add it with something, and usually that's carbs. Now, this can be a total disaster for diabetes, because remember, we have a problem with processing carbohydrates. We have a problem with insulin resistance. So if you go haywire on your carbs, in theory, your blood sugar is also going haywire, okay? Now, not to mention, we already talked about this, but the low-fat approach was really kind of an old theory that was infused into science and scientific research because of heart disease, okay? So it's not to say that it's not effective for certain approaches, especially things like heart disease, but when it comes to diabetes, the goal is to regulate your metabolism, and you need fats to be able to do that. Now, one of the reasons I'm such a strong proponent of the Mediterranean diet, it's not only because I studied medicine in Italy and I've spent years living there and I've been immersed in that culture and I see how powerful it is, but it's also been backed up by so much research. The Mediterranean diet pretty much every year is rated as the healthiest diet known because there's been so many health benefits and clinical benefits that have been directly linked to it, okay? And the Mediterranean diet has a higher amount of fat. It's not a low-fat diet. So whether you find yourself more on the side of the fence that's low carb or the side of the fence that's low fat, or you're not really sure where you land, I'd argue that the real reason you're struggling is not because of either of these things. It's not because of the carbs and it's not because of the fat. It's because you're missing the key nutritional ingredients your body absolutely needs to regulate its metabolism and regulate your blood sugar. So the solution is a body balanced approach. Now, I like to use this framework, which I have called the healthy trifecta. If this is your first video of mine on this channel, this is a new terminology. I made up the term, but I didn't make up the concept. Your body has these fundamental needs in order to function. No matter what dietary approach, no matter what religion you have, no matter what philosophy you abide by, your body has basic fundamental nutritional needs that you need to survive and thrive. If you don't, you have diseases and you run the risk of even death. So if you don't meet your body's needs, you're going to always struggle. This is why I'm always teaching my patients about the healthy trifecta. This is my simple framework that helps you understand what these basic fundamental needs are of your body. If you work with your body and not against it, you are going to have a much easier time with managing your diabetes. So what is the healthy trifecta here? Every time you eat a meal, I want you to prioritize protein, fiber, and healthy fats. Let's break down what each of these things do for us. Protein is going to help you stay full. It's going to preserve your muscle mass, which for the majority of you is probably the largest organ of your body by total weight of your body. Then the fiber is going to help us slow down our sugar absorption, improve our digestion, and help support our gut bacteria, which we know is really important for our health overall. And then our healthy fats, as mentioned before, they're important for enjoyment, they're important for satiety, they help us regulate our hunger, stay full longer, and stabilize our blood sugar. So when you put all three of these factors together, every single time you eat, whether it's a meal or a snack, something very powerful happens. You're going to stay full longer after your meal. You'll likely end up eating less overall because you don't get hungry between meals and you might need to snack less. And because of that, if you're snacking less between meals, your blood sugar is going to be more stable. Your cravings may disappear. Your body's getting the basic nutrients it needs to function properly. So how do we actually use the healthy trifecta in any diet, no matter who you are and where you live across the world? The best part is that this really works for you. You can take the framework and make it your own. Remember, the foundation of every meal, we start with protein. You do not want to risk being deficient in protein. It's absolutely fundamental no matter what you do. If you're doing the low carb approach, you want to make sure you're not just cutting out these carbs. You need to also have that protein at its minimum requirement, also increase your fiber, and have enough healthy fat to keep you full and stabilize your blood sugar. Instead, if you're doing a low fat approach, you want to make sure you're getting enough protein and fiber in there, of course, but also you need to include the right types of fats because you're not taking in very much fat. So if, again, your body needs fat to survive, it's essentially you have some. You don't want to waste any calories and any time eating the wrong types of fat. So this is going to be primarily fats that include unsaturated fatty acids that are called monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fatty acids. They come from foods like avocados, nuts, almonds, pecans, cashews, pistachios, olive oil, healthy seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds, sesame seeds, hemp seeds, you name it. All of these help support your metabolism. So I want you to really drill this point home. I do believe it is not just about choosing between which dietary trend you're going to follow, whether you find yourself low carb or low fat. It's really about making sure all of your meals are balanced in a way that actually supports your body. And I know that this topic can be super overwhelming. That is exactly why I made you a free, easy tool and a PDF guide where you can learn how to apply the healthy trifecta in what I call the perfect meal formula. The link is in the description below this video. So don't miss out on your free access to getting the thing that might really drill this home for you and make it so much easier and more fun for you to make your meals and your food. If you can adopt this approach, it's going to change everything for you. Remember, most of these diet plans out there fail. Diets is an industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. They churn every year. People jump on the train, they jump off the train, they jump on the train, they jump off the train. And the industry is aware of this. And they usually fail because they're always telling you what to avoid and they're minimizing the teaching of what you actually need to include. Instead, when you stay focused on what you need to include, you start from a place of abundance, you start from a positive mindset, which is really going to set the stage, and then your body is naturally going to start working for you instead of against you. If your body has enough nutrition coming in, it will tell you that it's full and it will basically ask you to stop eating. You won't want to keep going. Instead, if you're deficient and devoid of the nutrients you need, your body's going to tell you to keep eating until you get those nutrients. It just makes sense. This is very simple stuff. You really don't have to rely on your willpower alone. And willpower itself is really not a sustainable fuel. You need a tactic and you need an approach, especially an approach that will help you fight your cravings, especially when you reach your weakest moments, which all of us have them. We come home from work and we're exhausted, and we don't feel like cooking anything, and we usually end up reaching for the easiest calories we can find, okay? So this whole approach is for us to navigate that process and get ahead of it. Instead, when you do this and you're following the perfect meal formula, you're gonna be able to eat meals that leave you satisfied, keep your blood sugar stable. You're naturally going to start losing weight. It's the way the body was meant to function. And you don't really need to be extreme with all of these restrictions. So remember, this simple, straightforward approach, the most important thing about it is that it's sustainable. I don't want you to feel like you have to count your calories, you have to track your macros, you have to follow all these complicated rules in order to beat your diabetes and be healthy. Instead, I'd argue every single time that you just need to build really balanced meals that meet your body's fundamental needs. And if you need support, which it is totally fine if you do, remember, it took me more than 10 years of thinking about this to kind of crystallize and finalize my own approach to all of the world of nutrition. That is why I created this free guide for you. It's an easy PDF, 19-page book. It's very simple to read. There's tons of meal ideas inside of it, and I break down exactly how to apply the perfect meal formula. So that link is in the description below this video. You don't want to miss out on that. And if you're so fired up, you're ready to keep going with your learning, I'm so excited that you're here. Jump into my playlist where I have tons more information about diabetes on this channel. You're going to love those videos, and I'll see you in there.